Oh boy. So I've just come out of Wuthering Heights, the new film directed by Emerald Fennell and starring Margot, Robbie and Jacob Elordi. And I genuinely feel like I have to sit down and talk to someone about it. So that's you. You're my friend now. Hi. This is going to be completely spoiler free, by the way. I'm not going to talk about any plot specifics beyond what you would see on the poster or in the synopsis. And I just feel like I have to get this out of my system because this film has absolutely been everywhere. I mean everywhere. This is one of those releases where even if you're not looking for it, it finds you. Trailers, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all of it. This is very much a movie everyone is talking about situation. So quick setup before we get fully into it. The setup is fairly simple. This is based on the classic novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. And the story at its most basic level is tragedy strikes when Heathcliff falls in love with Catherine Earnshaw, a woman from a wealthy family in 18th century England. That's all you really need to know going into this. Now, let me tell you my expectations going into this thing. First of all, I have not read the book. I know, I can already hear the gasps. But genuinely, I already knew going into this that I'm not someone who's deeply attached to the original material. I wasn't sitting there anticipating how closely it would follow the original text. I wasn't checking off character motivations in my head. I wasn't looking for a faithful adaptation. I was just kind of looking for a good film. Second of all, this has already been hammered to death online about how it looks way different than what people imagine Wuthering Heights to be, because based purely on its marketing, it does just look like 50 Shades of Grey if it was a prestige period drama, which honestly, that didn't put me off. And thirdly, this is the big one, I really like Emerald Fennell as a director. I really liked Saltburn and I really liked Promising Young Woman. So I did go in a little bit optimistic. Cautiously optimistic? Sure, but still optimistic. I was actually really curious what she would do with a story that's already famous, already beloved, already completely soaked in cultural reputation. And while I did have an idea of what I would be walking into, I had no idea it would be this extreme. While I was watching the film, the only thing I could think of while I was watching was, is this a joke? And I don't mean that in a snarky Twitter way. I felt like I was genuinely being pranked. So let me just get the good out of the way, because there is good in this. Visually, this thing is outstanding, like genuinely. The cinematography in this thing is stunning. There are shots in this that are just flat out beautiful. The framing, the lighting, the way environments are used. It's one of those movies where you could pause it at pretty much any time and you would end up with a really nice still. The production design is absolutely on point. Costumes, interior, designs, all of it. And I really loved the outdoor cinematography of the moors. It felt like a character in itself. On a purely technical, surface level, aesthetic scale, this movie is outstanding. And that's about all the nice things I have to say about this movie. Because literally everything else, for me, this just felt like an empty parody-like fan fiction. It just feels so hollow, and not in a quiet, restrained, emotionally repressed, period appropriate kind of way. Hollow as in there is absolutely nothing underneath this kind of way. It feels like the entire purpose of this adaptation is to provoke people, to shock people, to make people feel uncomfortable, to generate headlines, to generate clips, to generate discourse, and not to tell the story it's supposedly trying to tell. And I mean, it clearly got a reaction out of me. I don't need a faithful adaptation. I really don't. I haven't read the book. I wouldn't know what a faithful adaptation would even look like. I'm not one of those people who thinks a film adaptation should just be a visual audiobook. But I do feel like there needs to be a reason this version exists. And I couldn't find that here. Stick with me here, okay? But this film genuinely feels like it was written by a teenager who had discovered BDSM for the first time. And I want to be clear, I could not care less if there's sexual content in a film. I was fully expecting it here. But I do care when it feels juvenile. I care when it feels like it's just there to get a reaction out of people. I care when it feels like it's going, oh, look how edgy we are. Look how transgressive this is. Look how bold we are. Without actually saying anything, because shock is not the same as depth. And provocation is not the same thing as insight. And this film, for me, just kept confusing those two things. Now, I should say as well, I was clearly not the core demographic for this film. The screening I went to was pretty much 95% women, and it was completely full. I was way out of my depth. And I could feel in the room that I was not the person this film was primarily talking to, which is fine. A movie doesn't have to be made for me, but I still expect it to be well written. And this is where it really fell apart for me. because the central relationship, the entire emotional engine of this movie, just did not work at all. Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie had zero chemistry. And that genuinely shocked me because individually, they're both great actors. And Jacob Elordi was actually my favourite performance of last year in Frankenstein. They're both really charismatic. They both managed to create a spark when they're on screen usually. Here, nothing. I felt absolutely nothing between them. No longing, no obsession, no tenderness, no toxicity, no tragedy, nothing. And it genuinely feels like these people were cast because they're attractive, not because they would serve the story in a good way. And when your film is centered around this intense, destructive, all-consuming love, that is a catastrophic problem. I just kept watching scene after scene with them, and my brain just kept going, why do I care for these people? Why am I supposed to feel like this is a special connection? Why am I supposed to believe this relationship is supposed to ruin lives? Because the film never earns it, it just assumes it. It assumes that if you put two very attractive people in an expensive frame and have them stare at each other intensely, the audience will fit in the emotional gaps. And it didn't. Not even a little bit. What makes this even more frustrating is that you can clearly tell there's a good underlying story here. Class conflict, power, belonging, resentment, emotional damage that calcifies into cruelty. All of that is clearly baked into its premise. But it feels like Fennell just skimmed past all of that. Like she wasn't actually interested in unpacking all of that. She just wanted to turn that intensity up to 11. Over and over again. Every emotional beat is exaggerated, every interaction is heightened, every visual choice is just screaming for attention. And instead of pulling me in, it pushed me further away every time because it starts to feel performative. It starts to feel like the movie is very aware of how provocative it is. Now, this is going to sound harsh, but it's true. This movie felt just so pointless. All of it did. It's just watching rich people do awful rich people things and getting freaky. And I'm supposed to be invested in their love story. And I just wasn't at all. And I want to be very clear here. Watching morally bad people isn't a problem for me. Watching toxic relationships is not a problem for me. Some of my favourite movies are about terrible human beings doing horrible things. But those films actually give me something to chew on. They give me a little bit of insight. They give me discomfort that actually leads somewhere. They give me complexity. And this didn't. It just gave me spectacle. Stylish spectacle. Expensive and well shot spectacle. But still, spectacle. It felt like the movie wanted me to be overwhelmed by the mood rather than engaged with its ideas. And for a story that's supposed to be tragic and emotionally devastating, it just felt incredibly dull. Which is probably the worst thing a movie like this can actually be. And I was just sitting there thinking, why this book? Why this story? Why this adaptation? What is this version trying to say that hasn't already been said? Or couldn't be said better in a completely original story? And I couldn't answer that. It honestly felt like the choice to name this Wuthering Heights was just a delivery system. A recognisable brand, a prestige wrapper. Something that allows you to do something outrageous under the protection of a classic. And I find that really disappointing. Especially because, again, I do think Emerald Fennell is better than this. That's what makes this sting a bit. I wanted to like this. I really did. I was ready to be on board with whatever she was doing. I was ready to defend a bold reinterpretation of a classic story like this. But bold only matters if it actually leads somewhere. And controversial only matters if it's actually saying something. Here, it just felt like it was getting freaky for freaky's sake. For me, this was style completely overwhelming substance. And I walked out feeling just confused and just flat. Not shaken, not moved. I was just underwhelmed, which is such a shame because on paper this could have been completely my thing. Beloved tragic romance, amazing cast, director I already like, big swing, big budget, big aesthetic, but it never came into something that felt emotionally real. It felt artificial and engineered. It felt like it wanted to be iconic more than it wanted to be honest. And maybe that's the cleanest way I can put it. I just really didn't like this. And honestly, I'm gutted. I wanted to walk out excited. I wanted to walk out conflicted even. I would have taken conflicted. But instead, I feel like I've walked out of a very well shot, very expensive exercise in shock. But yeah, man, those are just my thoughts. If you're excited for it or you've seen it already and you loved it, I'm genuinely glad for you. And I'd actually be really curious to know what about it worked for you. And if you didn't like it just like me, or you're even a bit on the fence about it, I'd still love to know what you think of it. But yeah, man, this was just a major disappointment for me. I'm gutted. So yeah, if you're still here and you've listened to me ramble this entire time, thank you for watching, thanks for hanging out. Like, subscribe, and go watch some movies. I'll see you in the next one.